Some tables are reserved for 2 people, yet the loneliest ones are often occupied by only one. Every Thursday evening, the staff at Hawthorne House knew exactly where Ethan Carter would sit. The 46-year-old white millionaire CEO always requested the same quiet table beside the tall window overlooking Boston's historic streets. It was a beautiful corner of the restaurant where warm amber lights reflected across polished glass, soft piano music drifted gently through the dining room, and couples, families, and old friends gathered to share meals that stretched into laughter. Ethan always arrived precisely at 7 o'clock wearing a tailored navy business suit beneath a charcoal overcoat, greeted every employee by name, ordered the same grilled salmon with seasonal vegetables, and thanked the servers before opening the leather notebook he carried everywhere. To everyone watching, he looked like a man who had achieved everything success could offer. Yet every week, the chair across from him remained empty. No one ever asked why. The restaurant staff quietly respected his privacy, believing some questions belonged only to silence. On one cool spring evening, rain tapped gently against the windows while the dining room slowly filled with conversations that blended into a comforting background melody. Ethan finished reviewing several business notes before setting his pen aside. For the first time all day, he looked around the room instead of at documents. He noticed grandparents celebrating an anniversary, parents helping their children choose dessert, college students sharing stories after classes, and friends laughing over steaming bowls of soup. Every table seemed connected by invisible threads of companionship. His table remained different. The empty chair opposite him had become so familiar that he barely noticed it anymore. Then, without warning, the chair quietly moved. Ethan looked up. A little girl no older than 8 stood beside the table, carefully holding a sketchbook against her chest. She had soft blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and the kind of gentle smile that appeared only after gathering enough courage to speak. She did not look frightened. She looked hopeful. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely. "May I borrow this seat for a little while?" Ethan blinked in surprise. Before he could answer, she quickly added, "My mom says it is not polite to interrupt people while they are eating, but she also says nobody should have to eat alone if someone can keep them company." Ethan glanced around the restaurant. Near the opposite side of the dining room, he noticed a waitress carrying several dinner plates while occasionally looking toward the little girl with quiet concern. The woman offered an apologetic smile before returning to her customers. Ethan looked back at the child standing patiently beside his table. She still held her sketchbook with both hands as though it were something precious. There was no expectation in her eyes, no request for money, no attempt to impress him. She simply waited for an answer. A small smile slowly appeared across Ethan's face, surprising even himself. "I suppose one chair can be shared," he replied warmly. The little girl thanked him with genuine delight before carefully taking the seat across from him. She placed her sketchbook on the table but kept one hand resting gently upon it, as though protecting an important secret inside its pages. Outside, the rain continued falling across the city streets. Inside, for the very first time in years, the chair across from Ethan Carter was no longer empty, and neither, though he did not yet realize it, was the evening waiting quietly ahead of him. The little girl sat carefully in the chair across from Ethan Carter, placing her sketchbook gently on the polished wooden table before folding her hands in her lap. She looked around the elegant restaurant with quiet appreciation, smiling as servers carried beautifully prepared meals between softly glowing chandeliers. Ethan noticed that although she seemed completely comfortable speaking with a stranger, she never forgot her manners. "My name is Lily Harper," she said politely. "Thank you for letting me borrow your table." Ethan nodded warmly. "I am Ethan." Lily smiled as though introductions were all she had wanted. For a few peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. The rain continued, tracing gentle patterns across the tall windows while the piano player in the corner quietly performed familiar melodies. Finally, Ethan looked toward the sketchbook resting beneath Lily's hand. "Do you enjoy drawing?" he asked. Lily's face brightened immediately. "It is my favorite thing." She slowly opened the cover, revealing page after page filled with colorful pencil drawings. Ethan expected pictures of animals, flowers, or playgrounds, but instead he found carefully illustrated scenes of people sitting together around dinner tables. Grandparents laughing with grandchildren. Parents helping children cut pancakes. Friends sharing pizza after school. Elderly couples drinking coffee while smiling at one another. Every drawing captured warmth and togetherness. Ethan quietly turned another page. Then another. His expression slowly changed. Near the center of the sketchbook appeared a familiar scene. A man wearing a navy business suit sat alone beside a large restaurant window. The table was beautifully arranged, yet the chair across from him remained empty. The drawing was unmistakably him. Ethan looked up with gentle surprise. "You drew this?" Lily nodded. "I started drawing you a few weeks ago." Ethan blinked in quiet amazement. "You have seen me here before?" Lily smiled shyly. "Almost every Thursday." Ethan glanced toward the dining room before looking back at the sketchbook. "How did you know I always sit here?" Lily pointed toward the opposite side of the restaurant where her mother continued serving guests with calm professionalism. "Mom works every Thursday night. I wait until her shift is over, so I usually sit near the kitchen with my sketchbook." Ethan finally understood. While he had been quietly eating dinner week after week, someone had been quietly observing him with the simple curiosity only a child could possess. Lily carefully turned to another drawing. This one showed the same restaurant table, but instead of leaving the second chair empty, she had drawn herself sitting across from him with both of them smiling. Ethan laughed softly. "You planned this before tonight?" Lily nodded without embarrassment. "I kept wondering what you looked like when you smiled at someone instead of your notebook." Ethan looked down at the picture once more. The drawing was simple, yet it carried a warmth no expensive painting could imitate. Lily rested one finger lightly on the page. "My mom says everyone has a story," she said quietly. "I thought maybe yours was lonely." Ethan looked through the rain-covered window toward the city lights shimmering outside. It had been a very long time since anyone had described him with such honest simplicity. He slowly closed the sketchbook with great care before sliding it gently back toward Lily. "You notice things many adults never see," he admitted. Lily smiled softly. "Maybe grown-ups get too busy looking everywhere except at each other." Ethan could not think of a single response. For the first time in years, the business reports waiting inside his leather notebook seemed completely unimportant compared to the quiet conversation unfolding across a dinner table that no longer felt empty. The restaurant gradually settled into the comfortable rhythm of an ordinary Thursday evening, yet nothing about Ethan Carter's night felt ordinary anymore. His dinner arrived exactly as it always did, carefully prepared and beautifully presented, but for the first time in years he did not immediately reach for his notebook or glance at his phone. Instead, he found himself listening to Lily Harper describe the stories hidden behind the drawings in her sketchbook. She carefully turned another page, revealing a picture of a smiling waitress carrying several dinner plates while a little girl sat nearby with colored pencils spread across a table. Ethan immediately recognized Lily's mother. "She looks happy," he observed. Lily smiled proudly. "She likes making people feel welcome." Ethan looked toward the dining room where her mother moved gracefully from table to table, greeting every guest with the same warm smile despite the busy evening. "Does she always work on Thursdays?" he asked. Lily nodded. "Almost every week. Thursday nights are busy, so she says she can earn a little more." Ethan quietly watched the waitress refill coffee cups, answer questions with patience, and somehow remember every customer's order without writing anything down. There was dignity in the way she worked, never rushing anyone even when the dining room grew crowded. Lily gently rested her hand on the sketchbook. "Sometimes I wish she could sit down and eat with everyone else." Ethan looked back at her. "Does she usually have dinner after work?" Lily shook her head. "Usually she is too tired." When we get home, she makes hot chocolate for me, and then she says she is not hungry. Ethan understood there was more behind those words than a child fully realized. He remained quiet, allowing Lily to continue at her own pace. She slowly opened to another drawing. This picture showed the same restaurant after closing time. Every table was empty except one. A little girl sat alone beside a window while a waitress finished cleaning the room. Between them rested two untouched dinner plates. "What is happening here?" Ethan asked gently. Lily smiled with quiet hope. "That is my favorite idea." Ethan studied the drawing more carefully. "Tell me about it." Lily looked toward her mother before answering. "One day, when Mom does not have to hurry anymore, we are going to eat dinner together before we go home. Not because it is a special holiday. Just because we finally have time." Ethan noticed the empty chair drawn beside the little girl. It looked remarkably similar to the empty chair that had stood across from him every Thursday evening. He looked around the restaurant once again. Families lingered over dessert, friends continued laughing together, and couples quietly shared conversations that seemed to make time move more slowly. Then he looked back at Lily. "Do you know something?" he asked softly. She tilted her head with curiosity. "What?" Ethan smiled in a way that felt unfamiliar but completely natural. "I think you noticed the most important things in this room." Lily laughed quietly. "That is because I spend a lot of time waiting." Those simple words settled deeply inside Ethan's heart. Waiting. Waiting for her mother to finish work. Waiting for dinner together. Waiting for ordinary moments that many people hardly noticed. As he looked at the little girl sitting across from him beneath the warm restaurant lights, Ethan realized that while he had spent years believing he was choosing to dine alone, Lily had shown him another possibility. Sometimes an empty chair was not simply a sign of loneliness. Sometimes it was an invitation waiting for someone kind enough to sit down. As the evening continued, the steady rhythm of the restaurant never seemed to slow. Servers moved gracefully between tables, glasses softly clinked together, and warm conversations floated through the air like familiar music. Yet Ethan Carter found himself paying attention to something entirely different. Every few minutes, Lily Harper quietly looked toward her mother, not because she needed anything, but simply to make sure she was doing all right. Each time their eyes met across the dining room, her mother smiled reassuringly before returning to another table. It was a silent conversation spoken without words, one built through years of trust. Ethan noticed it immediately. "You check on her a lot," he said gently. Lily smiled without looking embarrassed. "She checks on me too." Ethan glanced across the restaurant once more. "Even when she is busy?" Lily nodded. "Especially when she is busy." She pointed toward a small corner near the entrance where a comfortable chair stood beside a bookshelf filled with children's books. "That is where I usually wait. Mom says she always knows where I am, even when she cannot see me." Ethan followed her gaze. The little reading corner looked simple but welcoming, with soft lighting, a basket of crayons, and several well-loved storybooks. It suddenly occurred to him that while many children spent Thursday evenings at home watching television, Lily spent hers patiently waiting inside a restaurant so her mother would never have to wonder whether she was safe. Lily slowly opened her sketchbook again. This time she revealed a drawing Ethan had not expected. It showed the restaurant from above, every table carefully illustrated with families and friends gathered together. Near the center, one table held only a single man sitting beside the window. A small arrow pointed toward the empty chair across from him. Beside it, Lily had written in careful handwriting, "Maybe tomorrow someone will sit here." Ethan studied those words for several quiet seconds. "You really believed someone should have joined me?" Lily looked at him with complete sincerity. "Everybody smiles differently when they are sharing dinner." Ethan let out a quiet laugh. "You sound much older than 8. Lily shook her head. "I just like watching people." She leaned forward slightly before asking the question that neither business reporters nor investors had ever asked him. Do you always come here because the food is your favorite, or because this is where you feel the least lonely? Ethan stared through the rain-covered window toward the glowing city lights beyond the glass. The question settled into the silence between them. He searched for an easy answer but found none. Finally he admitted, I never really thought about it. Lily smiled kindly, as though she understood without needing a longer explanation. Sometimes grown-ups forget to ask themselves the important questions. Ethan slowly looked around the dining room again. He realized he knew the names of every executive in his company, the details of major business contracts, and the schedules of countless meetings, yet he had never once asked himself why he kept returning to the same table every Thursday evening. Perhaps it had never been about the meal at all. Perhaps some quiet part of him had been hoping that one ordinary night, someone would notice the empty chair and remind him that even successful people still needed connection. Across the room, Lily's mother finished serving another family before offering her daughter another gentle smile. Ethan noticed the warmth in that simple exchange and quietly understood that the richest moments inside the restaurant had never appeared on the menu. They were found in the people who chose to share the table, no matter how ordinary the evening first seemed. The evening slowly drifted toward closing time as the last few guests lingered over dessert and quiet conversation. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks glistening beneath the soft glow of streetlights. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere became calmer with every passing minute. Ethan Carter noticed that although Lily Harper had spent nearly an hour talking with him, she never once complained about waiting or asked when her mother would finish. She simply enjoyed the company, occasionally adding another small drawing to the page resting inside her sketchbook. Curious, Ethan watched as her pencil moved carefully across the paper. May I see what you are drawing now? He asked. Lily smiled and turned the sketchbook toward him. She had drawn the same table where they were sitting, but this time something had changed. The chair across from the man beside the window was no longer empty. 2 dinner plates rested on the table, and both people were smiling. Ethan could not help returning the smile. You finished the picture, he said. Lily nodded. It looked happier this way. Before Ethan could answer, Lily's mother approached the table carrying a small tray with 2 cups of steaming hot chocolate. She looked slightly embarrassed. I hope I am not interrupting, she said kindly. The kitchen was about to close, and the chef insisted that someone should enjoy the last hot chocolate of the evening. Ethan stood politely as she placed the cups on the table. Thank you, he replied warmly. Your daughter has made this one of the most memorable dinners I have had in years. The waitress smiled at Lily with unmistakable affection. She has always been good at talking to people. Lily laughed softly. Only the nice ones. Her mother gently shook her head before returning to finish her final responsibilities. Ethan watched her walk away before quietly asking, Does she always work this late? Lily nodded. Almost every closing shift. She says every extra hour helps pay for school supplies, rent, and little surprises once in a while. Ethan stirred the hot chocolate slowly without taking a sip. And what kind of surprises? Lily's eyes brightened. Sometimes it is a library book. Sometimes it is ice cream. One time she saved for 3 months just so we could visit the aquarium. Ethan imagined how many late evenings had quietly disappeared behind those simple memories. Lily opened the sketchbook one more time and carefully removed a folded piece of paper tucked between the pages. I almost forgot, she said. I made this for you before I came over. Ethan unfolded it carefully. Inside was a small drawing of the restaurant window with 2 simple words written beneath it in neat pencil. Leave room. Ethan looked at her with gentle curiosity. What does that mean? Lily wrapped both hands around her cup before answering. If you always leave one empty chair in your life, someone wonderful might surprise you by sitting there. Ethan lowered his eyes to the drawing as silence settled comfortably between them. The sentence seemed almost impossibly simple, yet it carried more wisdom than many speeches he had heard inside boardrooms filled with experienced executives. When he finally looked up again, he realized that the restaurant no longer felt like the place where he escaped another busy week. It had quietly become the place where he remembered something success had never been able to buy. Genuine connection never arrived through perfect planning. Sometimes it simply appeared as an 8-year-old girl carrying a sketchbook, asking with complete sincerity whether she could borrow an empty chair for just a little while. When Ethan Carter finally stepped outside the restaurant that Thursday night, the cool spring air felt different somehow, as though the city itself had grown quieter. He stood for a moment beneath the soft glow of the entrance lights, the folded drawing Lily Harper had given him resting safely inside the inner pocket of his charcoal overcoat. The simple words written beneath the picture stayed with him during the drive home. Leave room. By the following Thursday, Ethan found himself returning to Hawthorne House earlier than usual. The hostess smiled warmly when she recognized him and led him toward the familiar table beside the window. As always, the second chair stood waiting across from him, but this time Ethan did not see it as a reminder of solitude. He saw possibility. Before opening his notebook, he quietly moved it aside, leaving the center of the table completely clear. A few minutes later, Lily appeared from the reading corner carrying her sketchbook with the same bright smile that had greeted him the week before. "You came back," she said happily. Ethan smiled. "I believe I was expected." Lily laughed softly before taking her usual seat. Her mother noticed them from across the dining room and offered a grateful smile before returning to another table. Their conversation flowed as naturally as if they had known one another for years. Lily shared a new drawing of ducks swimming across a quiet pond while Ethan told her about a small park near his office where he often walked between meetings. For the first time in many years, he realized he was talking about ordinary moments instead of business achievements. Lily listened carefully, asking questions that made him notice details he had previously overlooked. "Do you ever stop walking just to hear the birds?" she asked. Ethan smiled sheepishly. "Usually I am thinking about my next meeting." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe the birds think you are too busy to hear them." Ethan laughed, surprising even himself with how genuine the sound felt. As the weeks quietly passed, Thursday evenings became something Ethan anticipated for reasons completely unrelated to work. Sometimes Lily showed him another page from her growing sketchbook. Sometimes Ethan brought a new book from a local bookstore after discovering one she might enjoy. They never exchanged expensive gifts or grand promises. Instead, they shared stories, questions, and observations that slowly built an unexpected friendship. One evening Lily opened to a fresh drawing unlike any she had shown before. It pictured the restaurant after closing time. Her mother sat beside her at the window table while 3 steaming dinners rested between them. Ethan looked closely and noticed a third chair occupied by a familiar man wearing a navy suit. "You added someone," he observed. Lily smiled warmly. "I decided dinners are better when nobody is left out." Ethan quietly looked toward her mother, who had just finished serving the final guests of the evening. She looked tired, yet her smile remained kind and patient. He suddenly realized that every Thursday she spent hours creating warm memories for strangers while rarely having enough time to enjoy one peaceful meal with her own daughter. That realization settled gently inside his heart. As the last customers prepared to leave and the restaurant lights softened for closing, Ethan looked once more at Lily's newest drawing. He folded his hands on the table and smiled with quiet certainty. An idea had begun to form, not inspired by business strategy or financial opportunity, but by a little girl who believed that every meaningful evening deserved one more occupied chair. Several more Thursdays quietly passed, and what had begun as one unexpected conversation slowly became a treasured tradition inside Hawthorne House. Without discussing it or making any formal arrangement, Ethan Carter and Lily Harper naturally found themselves meeting at the same window table every week. The restaurant staff soon noticed that the once lonely corner had become one of the warmest places in the dining room. The hostess smiled each time Ethan arrived because she no longer placed a menu on the second setting. She simply glanced toward the reading corner, knowing Lily would appear within a few minutes carrying her well-loved sketchbook. One Thursday evening, however, something felt different the moment Ethan entered the restaurant. The familiar laughter seemed quieter, several tables remained empty during what was normally the busiest hour, and the manager stood near the entrance studying financial papers with a worried expression before quickly folding them away whenever guests walked past. Ethan quietly noticed the change but said nothing. A few minutes later Lily joined him with her usual smile, although this time it faded almost as quickly as it appeared. She rested her sketchbook on the table without opening it immediately. Ethan recognized the unusual silence. "You have not shown me a new drawing yet," he observed gently. Lily traced one finger across the cover before looking toward her mother, who was speaking softly with the restaurant manager near the kitchen entrance. "Mom has been worried this week," she admitted. Ethan listened without interrupting. "She thought I could not hear her talking on the phone yesterday, but I did." Ethan's expression became more attentive. "What happened?" Lily lowered her voice. "The restaurant has not had enough customers lately. Mom said the owners are trying very hard, but if things do not get better, they might have to close before summer." Ethan slowly looked around the dining room again. Now the empty tables carried an entirely different meaning. They were no longer symbols of quiet evenings. They represented uncertain futures for every server, cook, dishwasher, hostess, and family depending on this place. Lily finally opened her sketchbook. Instead of colorful drawings filled with smiling families, the newest page showed the restaurant exactly as it looked tonight. Several empty tables stood beneath glowing lights while employees continued serving every guest with kindness despite the uncertainty surrounding them. Near the bottom of the page, Lily had drawn her mother standing beside the entrance with a hopeful smile that seemed determined not to disappear. "I do not want her to lose this place," Lily whispered. "She says this restaurant gave us a chance when nobody else was hiring." Ethan carefully studied the drawing before looking toward Lily again. "Has your mother said anything else?" Lily shook her head. "Only that we should always be thankful for today because tomorrow is never promised." Ethan quietly folded his hands together. Those simple words reminded him of countless business meetings where numbers often mattered more than the people behind them. Yet sitting here now, every empty chair represented a family waiting for tomorrow with quiet hope. As the evening continued, Ethan noticed something else. Despite their concerns, every employee continued greeting guests with genuine warmth, every plate was prepared with care, and every customer received the same thoughtful service as always. No one allowed worry to diminish their kindness. Ethan looked once more at Lily's drawing before carefully sliding it back toward her. Deep inside, a decision had already begun taking shape. This time, it was not inspired by profit, expansion, or opportunity. It was inspired by gratitude for a little restaurant where one empty chair had quietly changed far more than a single. Thursday evening. The following Thursday evening, Ethan Carter arrived at Hawthorne House carrying no briefcase, no stack of reports, and no intention of reviewing business notes. Instead, he carried only Lily Harper's folded drawing inside the pocket of his navy jacket, the same drawing with the simple words that had quietly reshaped the way he looked at an empty chair. As he entered the restaurant, he noticed something encouraging. More guests filled the dining room than the previous week, but several tables still remained unoccupied during what should have been the busiest part of the evening. Lily greeted him with her familiar smile before taking her place across from him. "I am glad you came," she said warmly. Ethan smiled. "I would not have wanted to miss Thursday." Before their meals arrived, Ethan asked a question he had been considering for days. "Lily, what makes this restaurant special to you besides your mother working here?" Lily looked around the room as though the answer surrounded her. "People celebrate birthdays here. Grandparents bring their grandchildren here after school concerts. Couples come back every anniversary because they remember their first dinner together. Families tell stories here that they will remember forever. She paused before adding softly, places can hold happy memories just like people do. Ethan quietly nodded. Those words stayed with him long after their meals were served. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed, Ethan politely asked whether he could speak with the restaurant manager for a few minutes. Lily and her mother remained nearby, quietly organizing menus while the conversation took place inside the small office near the entrance. The manager explained that rising operating costs and several difficult seasons had placed tremendous pressure on the business. The food remained excellent, the staff remained dedicated, and loyal customers continued returning, but attracting enough new guests had become increasingly difficult. Ethan listened carefully without interrupting. When the manager finished, Ethan did not offer to purchase the restaurant. Instead, he offered something completely different. Through his company's community partnership division, Brooks Ventures would provide experienced business consultants at no cost to help redesign marketing strategies, strengthen neighborhood partnerships, improve online visibility, and organize family events that celebrated the restaurant's long history. The restaurant would remain independently owned, every employee would keep working, and the identity everyone loved would remain untouched. The manager stared at Ethan in astonishment before quietly asking, "Why would you do this for us?" Ethan glanced toward the dining room where Lily sat beside her mother coloring another page inside her sketchbook. "Because some places are worth protecting exactly as they are," he answered. Over the following weeks, subtle changes began appearing throughout Hawthorne House. Community music nights attracted local families. Children's drawing afternoons filled the reading corner with laughter. Neighborhood schools partnered with the restaurant for art displays created by young students. Loyal customers returned more frequently, bringing friends who soon became regular visitors themselves. Every Thursday evening, Ethan continued sitting beside the window, but the dining room around him slowly became brighter with familiar faces and renewed energy. One evening, Lily quietly handed him a fresh drawing. It showed the restaurant filled with smiling guests, every table occupied, every server carrying meals with confidence, and not a single chair standing empty. Near the bottom of the page she had written one simple sentence. "Sometimes the best way to save a place is to remember why people loved it in the first place." Ethan carefully folded the drawing and smiled with quiet gratitude, realizing that the greatest solutions often began not inside a boardroom but across a dinner table where one thoughtful child had simply decided that no one should have to eat alone. 1 year later, Thursday evening arrived once again, and Hawthorne House glowed with the same warm light that had quietly welcomed countless families through its doors. The difference was no longer hidden inside financial reports or careful business plans. It could be seen in every occupied table, every cheerful conversation, and every familiar smile exchanged between guests who had made the restaurant part of their own traditions. The reading corner where Lily Harper had once waited patiently with her sketchbook had become one of the most beloved places in the restaurant. Shelves overflowed with donated books, children's artwork decorated the nearby walls, and every Thursday young visitors gathered there to draw while their families enjoyed dinner together. Ethan Carter arrived at his usual time, but his routine had changed forever. He no longer carried business papers into the dining room. Instead, he carried a small leather folder containing every drawing Lily had ever given him, carefully preserved like priceless works of art. As he approached the familiar window table, he smiled before sitting down. The chair across from him was already occupied. Lily looked up from her newest sketchbook with a grin that had become as familiar as the restaurant itself. Beside her sat her mother, no longer rushing from table to table that evening because the manager insisted she enjoy one dinner each month with her daughter before beginning a shorter shift. "We saved your seat," Lily said happily. Ethan laughed softly as he took his place beside them. "I would not have wanted anyone else to have it." Their meals arrived, and for the first time Ethan noticed that nobody at the table seemed eager to hurry through the evening. They talked about school projects, favorite books, community events, and the families who now filled the restaurant every weekend. Lily carefully opened her sketchbook one final time. She slowly turned it toward Ethan. The drawing showed the same window table where they now sat together. 3 smiling people shared dinner while every chair around them was occupied by families, friends, grandparents, children, and neighbors. Above the picture, sunlight streamed through the windows instead of rain, and beneath it Lily had written a simple sentence in careful handwriting. The best tables are never measured by how much food they hold but by how much love they make room for. Ethan looked at the drawing for several quiet moments before closing the sketchbook with gentle care. "This may be my favorite one," he admitted. Lily smiled. "It is mine too because this one finally happened." As they finished dinner, Ethan quietly reached into his jacket and unfolded the first drawing Lily had ever given him, the small picture of an empty chair beside a window with 2 simple words written underneath. "Leave room." He placed it beside her newest drawing on the table. The 2 pictures rested side by side, one showing an empty chair filled with hope, the other showing that same chair occupied by friendship, gratitude, and belonging. Ethan realized that the greatest change had never taken place inside the restaurant, his company, or even the city around them. It had happened quietly inside his own heart on the evening a little girl asked whether she could borrow an empty seat. As warm laughter surrounded the table and the piano gently filled the dining room once more, Ethan understood a truth that would remain with him for the rest of his life. Wealth could reserve the finest table in any restaurant, but only kindness could make sure nobody had to dine alone.